Analogy of the party, all particles are equal until they enter the room. Both Peter Higgs and a tax collector have zero mass. It is the interaction with the crowd that causes them to gain mass. I'll say that again. Mass comes from interactions with the field.
In the previous episode of Dependent Origination in Plain English, I mentioned that this interaction makes our world or the universe appears to us. And I'm going to expand on that with this particular clip. This is the 8th episode of Dependent Origination in Plain English. Here I am aligning the recent development in physics along with Buddha's teaching of dependent origination. This dependent origination is the cause for whole universe. In other words, this 12 links of dependent origination is occurring every millisecond in the form of cause and effect. So that process is always there. And that is what we are really experiencing by interacting with it. So this interaction is the key element in here for this existence. Now when I hear these clips, I can relate to that, and they are zeroing into that Buddha's discovery of that longing or that desire or that clingingness is the cause for this whole universe or for yourself. So bear with me. I'll explain this along with the help of this nicely done animation, which gives a simple explanation of what is the Higgs field and the boson effect on that Higgs field. First, we'll listen to a part of this clip and then I'll comment on that.
The Higgs bosons are wiggles in the field, like the bump you see when you twitch a rope. But how does this field give mass to particles? If this sounds confusing to you, you're not alone.
If you listen to my previous episode, we discussed about this bumpy wiggle or the boson wiggle kind of effect that on the Higgs field. And it is unique to Higgs fields. Now, you can't find this kind of a wiggles on any other field. That is why they don't have any energy or the mass. So mass begin with this little wiggles. So it's been named as excitation as well. So when I heard that part, I can just relate to the every one of us has our just emotions coming through us, just like some excitation or some wiggles coming through our a very calm, quiet our inner self. So as I said earlier, this is our inner self, or which is cognitive field, which I equate to the modern discovery of Higgs field, is within us and everywhere in this whole universe. So that kind of an energy field is what we are really referring here. But first, we'll go into our own inner field, which Buddha has mentioned as the vijnana, or that cognitive field, or the consciousness, which is the third link of dependent origination. This third link of dependent origination is interacting with the surrounding, with our craving or our becoming. So that is what I do see that as boson effect. If I simplify that, what I meant by that is that really you would get a kind of a urge or the kind of a thirst to do something. So that kind of excitation is that boson effect these scientists are referring to, which comes through you, within you, inside in your cognitive field. So I'm going to explain that a little bit more on the Buddha's term, where you interact with outside world and forming, or we could call it reinforcing, your cognitive field or the consciousness, which is the third link of the dependent origination. By interacting and clinging into our perceptions. In Buddha's term, five aggregates. So this is a more detailed view of this boson effect. So I'll just mention it because I'm not going to go to do too much detail here because that might complicate the subject that we are currently discussing. Please note that this animated clip was explained from an observer point of view, like somebody is observing the Higgs field and then the boson effect on that Higgs fields. But I am explaining on the opposite side of it, like, as being experience it, like you experience your own emotions or your longing.
Suppose there is a large cocktail party at the CERN laboratory filled with particle physics researchers. This crowd of physicists represents the Higgs field. If a tax collector entered the party, nobody would want to talk to them, and they could very easily cross the room to get to the bar. The tax collector wouldn't interact with the crowd in much the same way that some particles don't interact with the Higgs field. The particles that don't interact, like photons for example, are called massless.
Imagine you are walking in the park and enjoying the tranquility in the surrounding, and there are many people passing by. You don't interact with them, right?
Now suppose that Peter Higgs entered the same room, perhaps in search of a pint. In this case, the physicist will immediately crowd around Higgs to discuss with him their efforts to measure the properties of his namesake boson. Because he interacts strongly with the crowd, Higgs will move slowly across the room. Continue our analogy, Higgs has become a massive particle through his interactions with the field.
Supposing while you are walking in the park, you meet one of your friends and you will be excited and your emotion will come up, and in the same time you will start interacting with your friend and your tranquility will get disturbed with that excitement of meeting your friend. That is what we are talking about here. From the observer point of view, that cognitive field has been disturbed with that excitement of boson effect.
Let's pretend our crowd of partygoers is uniformly spread across the room. Now suppose someone pops their head in the door to report a rumor of a discovery at some distant rival laboratory. People near the door will hear the rumor, but people far away won't, so they'll move closer to the door to ask. This will create a clump in the crowd. As people have heard the rumor, they will return to their original positions to discuss its implications, but people further away will then ask what's going on. The result will be a clump in the crowd that moves across the room. This clump is analogous to the Higgs boson. It is important to remember that it is not that massive particles interact more with the Higgs field. In our analogy of the party, all particles are equal until they enter the room. Both Peter Higgs and a tax collector have zero mass. It is the interaction with the crowd that causes them to gain mass. I'll say that again. Mass comes from interactions with the field.
Here, most important part is that your interaction. So if you didn't notice your friend, you will not interact with that person. Or if you don't hear bad news, you are not interacting with that news. In the same time, in Buddha's term, all six senses are the cause for this interaction. So when you get something pass through your all senses, any of your senses, that will come through, and then if you interact with it, only it's really impact to you. If you don't interact with it, it just pass away. Just like any thoughts comes and goes. If you really clinging to those thoughts, that will create a lump in your cognitive field, and that will make you really unhappy or happy. So this is the connection between this observed movement on this particle physics with the actual experiential insight coming from your own experience. So that is how I see this whole process. So that interaction start with your longing or your excitement or your wanting to know about or talk about or actually enjoy or indulge about. So that is what makes us connected with this whole universe. So in a Buddha's term, that really that clingingness or that thirst, if you just let go of that thirst, that interaction will not occur. So then you will not really entangle with this existence. So this is the very rudimentary cause for this whole existence, as I mentioned earlier, and which is the very first link of dependent origination, as it is been known as ignorance of not knowing that thirst or that clingingness is the cause for this whole universe. I hope you got my message on this explanation, but you could actually check with the other episode that I have done, and you might be able to comprehend this whole process and then the Buddha's message of non self, which will occur if you let go of that clinging. In other words, cause for the wiggles in this Higgs fields is that our urge or our longing or our excitation, which is being labeled as boson. So, with that boson effect, the whole universe is being created because the other field of this universe has no energy or no mass. That mass comes with that boson effect on the Higgs fields. In Buddha's term, or with my experience, what I'm referring here is actually our cognitive field, which is very calm, quiet, and inner peace, is being disturbed by our longing or our excitation with the interaction that we create through our six senses. So that's how this whole universe is being created. And in Buddha's Cosmos Sutra or the Loka Sutra, he mentioned the same thing. He said that really, of course, this whole universe is being created through that six senses. With that six senses, we just grab or they cling into the all the outside world and interact with them and then create our whole universe within us. That hologram of universe in us. If you let go of that craving or that attachment or that interaction, that whole universe will disappear from you. That will bring you the liberation or the calmness or that nirvana or the enlightenment that you are looking for. You will be awakened